Tonight, we begin with a recording that was supposed to have been destroyed years ago, served. A recording of Vladimir Putin speaking when he believed, with absolute certainty, that no one outside his most trusted circle would ever hear his words. Not diplomats, not foreign intelligence, not even most of his own government. But Stes Ifrit speaking freely, saying things he would never say if he knew the world was listening. And what he said on that recording, what he revealed when he believed he was completely safe, made American intelligence officials physically sick. Not metaphorically, not as an expression. Literally, physically sick. Officials who have spent decades analyzing the darkest intelligence, who have reviewed evidence of atrocities and plots that would horrify ordinary citizens, had to leave the room. Some vomited. Others sat in silence with their heads in their hands. Because what Putin said when he thought no one was listening revealed something about his plans, his psychology, and his intentions that was more disturbing than anything they had encountered in their careers. Tonight, we reveal how this recording survived Russia's attempts to destroy it. We explain what Putin said that caused such an extreme reaction, and we explore what this means for a world that now understands, with terrible clarity, exactly who Vladimir Putin really is. The recording was made 17 years ago in a private dacha outside Moscow, a location that Putin used for meetings so sensitive that even his own security services were kept at a distance. The dacha was swept for listening devices daily. The staff were vetted to an extreme degree. The communication systems were entirely separate from any government network. What Putin did not know was that one member of his inner circle, a man who had served him faithfully for over a decade, had grown so disturbed by what he witnessed that he made a decision that would eventually cost him his life. He began recording. Not for money, not for foreign intelligence, but because he believed that someday someone would need to know the truth about who Vladimir Putin really was. He recorded dozens of conversations over a period of 3 years, hiding the devices in ways that defeated every security sweep, storing the recordings in locations that Russian intelligence never discovered. And then, when his position became precarious, when he sensed that suspicion was beginning to fall on him, he arranged for the recordings to be smuggled out of Russia through a network of intermediaries who had no idea what they were carrying. The man who made the recordings did not survive. He was found dead in his apartment 6 months after the last recording was made, officially ruled a suicide, though the circumstances suggested otherwise. Russian intelligence knew there had been a leak, knew that something had been recorded, but they did not know how much or where the recordings had gone. What followed was a years-long operation to locate and destroy every copy. Intermediaries were tracked down. Safe houses were raided. People who had handled the recordings without knowing their contents disappeared. Russian intelligence was relentless and largely successful. They destroyed dozens of copies. They eliminated everyone they could identify who had been part of the smuggling network. They believed, with reasonable confidence, that they had contained the breach. But they missed one copy, one recording stored by an intermediary who died of natural causes before Russian intelligence could reach him, passed to a family member who had no idea what it contained. That family member, years later, attempting to sell what he thought were merely old recordings of a minor Russian official, contacted a dealer who recognized enough of the content to understand its potential value. And eventually, through a chain of transactions too complex to fully detail, the recording reached American intelligence. The recording arrived at CIA headquarters 14 months ago, initially classified as potentially significant but unverified. Authentication took months. Voice analysis confirmed the speaker was Putin. Context clues within the recording matched known events from the period. Technical analysis of the recording medium confirmed its age. Gradually, certainty grew. This was genuine. This was Putin. And this was Putin speaking in ways that no one outside his innermost circle had ever heard. Officials who had reviewed preliminary transcripts warned that the content was disturbing in ways that standard threat assessments did not capture. They recommended psychological preparation. They suggested that officials be given the option to leave if the content became too distressing. These warnings were dismissed as excessive. The officials who would review the recording were hardened professionals. They had seen everything. They could handle anything. They were wrong. The recording begins with mundane matters, discussions of domestic politics and economic issues that reveal Putin's thinking, but would not shock anyone familiar with Russian governance. But approximately 23 minutes into the recording, the conversation shifts. Putin is asked by an associate about his long-term vision for Russia's place in the world. The question is casual, almost philosophical, the kind of question that might be asked over drinks among old friends. And Putin's answer, delivered in a relaxed, almost jovial tone, is what made officials physically sick. What he described was not strategy. It was not geopolitics. It was a vision of the future so dark, so callous about human life, so casually genocidal in its implications, that officials who had spent careers studying threats could not process what they were hearing. Putin spoke about entire populations as problems to be solved rather than people to be considered. He described scenarios involving mass casualties with the emotional detachment of someone discussing crop yields. He laughed at points that were not jokes, that could not be jokes, that revealed something about his psychology that transcended policy disagreements into something pathological. The specific content of Putin's statements remains classified at the highest levels, and for good reason. Public disclosure could cause panic. It could damage diplomatic efforts to contain the threat Putin represents. It could provide propaganda value to Russia if taken out of context. But what can be said is this: Putin's private vision for the future bears no resemblance to his public statements. The restraint he shows in official communications, the diplomatic language he employs when the world is watching, all of it is performance. In private, when he believes he is safe, Putin reveals himself as someone whose ambitions and methods would horrify even those who consider themselves his allies. Something that made officials who have seen the worst of human nature unable to continue listening. The physical reactions among those who reviewed the full recording were unprecedented. One senior analyst left the room after 31 minutes and was found in a bathroom having vomited. Another sat motionless for the remainder of the recording and then requested immediate leave, unable to return to work for 3 days. A third, a veteran of decades in intelligence work, was observed crying silently at his desk, something his colleagues had never witnessed in all their years together. The recording broke through defenses that years of exposure to disturbing content had built. It did so because what Putin revealed was not merely a threat to be assessed, but a window into a way of thinking that was fundamentally incompatible with any moral framework these officials recognized. The intelligence community has struggled with how to use the information the recording provides. On one level, it confirms what many already suspected about Putin's true nature. It validates assessments that have guided policy for years. It provides evidence that can be shared with allies to strengthen resolve and coordination. But on another level, the recording creates a problem that has no easy solution. How do you deter someone whose private statements suggest he genuinely does not care about consequences that would stop any normal leader? How do you negotiate with someone whose unguarded moments reveal contempt for the very concept of negotiation? How do you plan for scenarios that previously seemed too extreme to take seriously, but that the recording suggests Putin actively contemplates? These questions have consumed officials since the recording was authenticated. The answers remain elusive. What Russia's attempt to destroy the recording reveals is perhaps as significant as the content itself. Russian intelligence spent years and substantial resources trying to eliminate every copy. They killed people. They conducted operations across multiple countries. They treated this recording as an existential threat to Putin's position. This reaction tells us that even Putin's own security services understood how damaging the recording would be if it ever surfaced. They knew that the world hearing Putin speak freely would fundamentally change how he was perceived. They knew that the careful image of strategic rationality that Putin projects would be destroyed by his own words. Their desperation to bury this recording was an acknowledgement of just how devastating its contents truly are. The fact that they failed, that one copy survived their efforts, is perhaps the most significant intelligence development in years. The official who was present when the recording was first played for senior leadership described the aftermath in terms that convey the weight of the moment. He said the room was silent for what felt like several minutes after the recording ended. He said that people avoided eye contact as if what they had heard was shameful even to have witnessed. He said that when someone finally spoke, they asked a question that no one could answer: what do we do now? That question has guided the response ever since. The recording has been shared with the closest allies through the most secure channels available. Leaders who have been briefed have reacted with the same visceral disturbance that American officials experienced. A consensus is building that the threat Putin represents may be even greater than publicly acknowledged, and planning is underway for contingencies that, before the recording, seemed too extreme to seriously consider. What happens next remains uncertain. Alliance commitments are being strengthened, and a fundamental reassessment of what is possible in confronting Putin is underway. The recording that Russia tried to destroy has survived. The words Putin spoke when he thought no one was listening have been heard, and the officials who now carry the weight of that knowledge are grappling with a reality that is more disturbing than they ever imagined. Tonight, somewhere in secure facilities across the Western world, officials who have heard the recording are trying to reconcile what they know with the responsibilities they bear. They are making decisions based on information they cannot share. This is the reality that the surviving recording has created, a reality where Putin's mask has slipped, where his true intentions are known, and where the world must somehow respond to a threat that is more personal, more pathological, and more dangerous than anything previously understood. The recording Russia tried to destroy has changed everything. The words Putin said when he thought no one was listening have been heard, and the officials who listened are still, months later, trying to recover from what they learned. This story is far from over. The recording exists. The knowledge it contains is spreading, and the implications will shape the world for years to come.